Yeah, so I just randomly read about it in around March of 2011. And at first, at the time I had a company selling virtual items and currencies for online games. So like World of Warcraft Gold, Diablo 2, Magic Swords, and RuneScape Gold, stuff like that. So to me, when I first read about it, I was like, oh, here's another digital currency that we can sell on our e-commerce platform for digital assets. But then as I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, I realized it was like something much bigger than just another like video game money. It was something that could completely change the world. And, I was aware of like other attempts at sort of creating this global currency, like e-gold, for example, that they always seem to stumble when they came up against like regulation, and Bitcoin being completely decentralized, sort of eliminated that to some extent, that there could just be one guy thrown in jail, or one company to be sued for this or something like that. So, as I learned more about it, the technology was just very interesting, sort of this confluence of like all of these different fields that I was already interested in, from finance to economics to just like philosophy and computer science, all of these things coming together. And there was already just like a ton of information out there at the time, early 2011. There was a lot to read. It was like clear that, the people in this community were already like my kinds of people, like really interested in the tech and, really interesting discussions happening. So that's kind of like how I got interested in it. And I always thought, even before, Mt. Gox, before I started mining, before I started trading, any of that, that it just was like really cool. And it would be really cool if this thing could somehow become globally accepted or used as a store of value. It was, Caitlin Long and Trace Mayer and some other people. There's a blockchain task force there that came together. And, Wyoming is a great state if you want to set up an LLC or a corporation. They've got great privacy protections and stuff like that. So, it makes sense that they would do it. It's also a small enough state, that they can actually get things done. And I think they're fairly libertarian as well. So it seemed like pretty well aligned with kind of the ethos of Wyoming. So this all happened through, a series of bills that came out. The SPDI was just one thing to come out of this, but there's a bunch of other crypto specific laws that were passed in Wyoming related to, what are the liabilities of software developers, or what happens to your keys? Do you have to disclose your keys if in a lawsuit, or things like this? They address like a bunch of stuff, which is awesome. So it really makes Wyoming kind of a very excellent and safe place to do crypto, because you have this certainty that you don't really have in other places, where if some of these things come up, they might be trying to figure it out for the first time, and it might just come down to the judge that you get. Whereas this stuff is just explicitly spelled out in Wyoming. But it took them quite a while. I say a while, but by the other standards set by other states, like this could never happen in a place like California, because it's just too bureaucratic. The process would be too long. And maybe it looks now like other states are looking to copy what Wyoming has done. So I think that's awesome. But yeah, so it's been a couple of years going now, and we still don't have the bank fully launched yet, so it'll be a little bit more time to come as well. Yeah, it's been a process. I have to think about that. There are a lot of interesting conversations that came up, and there are a lot of like really smart people that showed up to give testimony at some of these hearings, and we're working behind the scenes on some of this stuff. I think the thing about not having to be compelled to disclose your private keys is really cool. For the SPDI, the bailment, I think, is really really important, which is that these funds don't sit on the balance sheet of the exchange. So in a bankruptcy scenario, the money that has been deposited by clients is not up for grabs for ordinary creditors like the landlord who didn't have his rent paid or whatever, which is what has happened with Mt. Gox in Tokyo, is that you have all these random business creditors coming after basically the customer's deposits to pay off their business complaints. So that was definitely an interesting discussion, but I think it wasn't really contentious. I think everyone understood why that had to be right, because we had Mt. Gox as an example of, how wrong it could go. And I don't think that was what the customers really presumed was like the situation either, right? Like when you put your money into a bank, you don't think like this bank, if they don't pay their landlord, the landlord's going to take money out of my account. That's exactly what's happening. So, yeah, I don't know. There's not something that stands out as just like being super mind blowing. But there was, a lot of really interesting conversations across a broad spectrum. And, if you go look at the bills that were passed, I mean, they've clearly thought about a lot of like edge cases, and they've addressed those. I think it's awesome to do, and we did it once years ago. We found some issues with the process, which is why we didn't repeat it yet. One, it was just really hard to find the auditor to do it. The auditor really has to be willing to take some reputational risk themselves, because there is a chance that they are somehow duped in the process of running the audit. I mean, just like we've seen all these smart contracts recently, all these DeFi, like, yield farming protocols get hacked, and like they've all been audited. There's some auditor who's like signed off on all of these things. It's like, their reputation is just gone after that happens. So, I mean, I think it's going to be the same, maybe even worse, for a centralized exchange auditor. So there's some risk to them. But I think it's awesome to do it. And, this is something that we do want to do again very soon, because I think it's just great to set the example and set a standard and hopefully bring awareness to this and encourage other people to ask their exchanges or their wallets or whoever their custodian is to do this as well, before we get into another situation where it's like, oh, this was they were fractional for years, and now instead of being $1 million loss, it's $100 million loss. I guess the differences are that we'll be hooked up to, the FedWire system, the traditional fiat rails system, directly as a bank, rather than having, another bank in the middle. But I mean, basically, we're a bank of crypto, right? And of fiat. We just sort of have, instead of our own bank, there's another bank. But we still have to do all of the, I guess we're probably more like PayPal in that way, right? Than a Bank of America or something. We have these kind of banks behind the scenes, but now we'll more explicitly be a bank as well. And we could have like physical branches and stuff like that. So, I think the main difference really is just we've got some new regulators who are going to be supervising the bank. And that's probably about it, really. I mean, our obligations to the customer are all pretty much the same still. Keep their money safe and give it to them when they want it. I think it would be kind of fun. It's kind of like a retro throwback to like start up a physical bank branch. Would anyone come to it? Who knows? Probably not. But that might be fun. I don't know. I don't know if setting one up in Wyoming, is a place, but like maybe we could set one up in San Francisco or Berlin, or well, we'd have to get another different banking license to do that. But like somewhere where there's just like a lot of young tech people who are already into Bitcoin, like it could be fun to do just like one, like how some companies just have like one flagship store somewhere and then the rest of the business is online. That could be fun to do. But, I think that clientele, well, it'd be interesting to see who would actually want to walk in there. Probably maybe you only come in if you have a really serious problem, or you need to move a lot of coins. You want to be, 100% sure, you need to verify somebody in person or something like that. But I would guess it would be more the retail customer that would come in, because like if you're like a super whale, I don't know, maybe you just are more conscious about like who's monitoring the front door of the bank to see like who's walking in and out, and then are they following you back to your car, back home? Right. I mean, you already have to worry about that when you're going to like the ATM. Like, is someone else like sitting in the parking lot, like waiting for me to get my cash, right, and then they're gonna like hold me up at gunpoint? I think with Bitcoin, I mean, everyone should be aware of the risks of letting people know that you're holding Bitcoin. Because people do crazy stuff. I mean, some people just don't understand the technology. They'll just be like, oh, that guy has a lot of Bitcoin. Okay, I'm gonna like, break into his house. And there was some guy in the UK that was like, had some guys break into his house and sort of like hold him hostage until he gave him some Bitcoin. So, those are rare, but I think everyone should be careful about, talking about money or cash that they're basically keeping, in their house. Right. I don't feel a lot of responsibility for this new space. I think we can help educate people to be careful with it. I don't have any problem with people going to trade on DEXs or doing, engaging in DeFi yield farming strategies or anything like that. I think that's awesome. And I think that's the way of the future. But I think there are a lot of people who are just being reckless, moving a bit too fast to get these products out, and are not really, vetting them as if they're really going to hold them the amount of money that they are, right? Like if you were going to launch a bank, if you're like Fort Knox or something, you're expecting to have like tens or hundreds of millions of dollars basically secured by this piece of code. Wouldn't you spend, I don't know, if you're going to have like $100 million in there, maybe it's worth like $5 million to make sure that, it's all secure at least, rather than getting one like $50,000 audit and then calling it good and then rolling it out. When these things blow up, they usually come asking the centralized exchanges or the wallets to freeze funds that are being, drained from the contract, or help them track down who did it or whatever. It becomes this like externalized cost where, and I also think there's this, potential for moral hazard, right? Like they want to reduce the impact that it's had on them after the fact because they didn't do planning and they didn't invest up front. And so now it's like our problem because they didn't do their work up front. And that's kind of what I meant by that, was just, I think to some extent, some of these lessons just have to be learned the hard way. Of course we don't want tons of people to lose tons of money, but I feel like if people don't get burnt a few times, then they're just not going to learn that, the next time there's a brand new DeFi yield farming contract that appears, maybe they ought to like think twice before they load it up with their life savings. Maybe they'll wait a while and see if it's still alive in a year, or maybe they'll ask for a few more audits before they deposit their money. Anyone who's got custody of your keys is like the biggest threat. They become these giant honeypots, these like just treasure chests that are accumulating these bug bounties basically. And if someone can hack them, they could drain a ton of money out. And Bitcoin's like the best thing you could steal. You don't have to like walk into a bank with a gun. You can do it from the other side of the world. So there are lots of hackers around the world who would love to hack these crypto treasure chests that are out there on the internet. So people need to be worried about that. As far as like transparency, I think, audits, more audits would be good. Proof of reserves would be good. but there's still some gaps there, right? Like I could be short 10,000 Bitcoin, but I could also go borrow 10,000 Bitcoin to fill that hole for the period of the audit, maybe, right? So like, and then I return it 2 days later. So there's still some gaps, but at least, if you're doing these over time, all the time, I think it just gets less likely that there's a big gap there. And at some point, you just won't be able to borrow enough to fill the hole, right? Like if you had 200,000 Bitcoin that you were short, that might be hard to borrow. Someone, you would go ask to borrow that from someone, and be like, whoa, like why is Kraken asking to borrow 200,000 Bitcoin? That's kind of shady, right? So I think getting the audits done regularly, even though there are some gaps, is still better than nothing. For the centralized exchanges, this is like kind of the trade-off for kind of closed source projects, I guess, is the public cannot just audit what you're doing. But on the other hand, it's a lot harder to figure out where the holes are when you don't have, when it's basically a black box from the outside. And some of the things that we do, we can only be so transparent about, right? Like we can't say like, these are the guys that have the keys and, they're going to come together at this time to unlock everything. You can't give people that kind of information. And so you can only kind of describe things like in general terms, like, yes, we use multi-sig, or, the coins are sharded all over the world or whatever. And you can say that stuff, but it's like really, it might be very hard to verify that from the outside, and then anyone can make up any story they want about their custody situation and their security protocols. And it's just really hard to know from the outside what's actually going on behind the scenes. And, as we saw with Quadriga, they were like the largest exchange in Canada, had hundreds of millions of dollars on the platform. And it turns out like it was like a 3-man operation, and all of the key management was done by one guy, like by himself. So, from the outside, and just like from the internet, you see this website and you just assume, like, okay, this looks like a bank. When you're looking at the bank's interface online, you don't see like, oh, this is like a 50,000 person company and there's like all this crazy data centers and infrastructure behind the scenes. Like, I think you just assume that's there, but it's like so easy just to put up a website that looks just like that doesn't have all that stuff behind the scenes. So, for people that are trying to evaluate whether they should trust a crypto company or not, I think like looking at the history of the company, like how old is it? You can look and see like who's been publicly associated with the company. Is it run by some unknown person out there in the world? Or is it, there's, the executive team is in San Francisco and if you had to sue them, you could go there and do that. And, I guess you can get a sense from just the overall headcount of the company, if that's publicly available as well. Kraken's like 1,200 people. We've got, our security team is 40 plus people. So having a security team of 40 plus people, we obviously didn't start there. We kind of built our way up as the client balance is built up and as things got more complex. But it's hard to look back and see like, how could a 3-person company, really be doing anything close to what you could do with a 40-man dedicated security team, and it's just like night and day, right? And when you only have a few people, you don't have so many people to trust. So that's like definitely one advantage of that size. But you also can't do like all of these more proactive things, like you don't have dedicated security guards in your office. You don't have a red team out there like trying to hack you for your own benefit all the time, stuff like that. So I would say like people, they really need to do their research and not assume that because something looks like a bank that there's really anything there behind the scenes. Well, I think we all learned our lesson at the beginning of 2018 and of 2017 that like this space had the ability to just explode without notice. And I think we were all caught by surprise back then. We had 50,000 plus new users signing up a day. There are other services, that had that level or more as well. And, there's several bottlenecks in the process. It's not just us, it's also who's our KYC vendor, who's reviewing all of the new applications for accounts. It's also the bank. How many transactions a day can they handle? So, you figure out through this process, where are the bottlenecks, and you have to sort those things out. So, over the last few years, we have set up, basically more redundancy across vendors, so we can do more load balancing when things get really hot. So instead of just running everything through, one bank or whatever, we can spread transactions out across a few different banks so that, they're not the bottleneck for everything. So other things we've done, we've scaled up the infrastructure tremendously. About 6 months ago, we started our plan, which was basically prepare for the surge plan, which is probably a little more than that. But we had a theory that because of all the things happening at the end of this year, we had the halving in May, we had the election coming up, we had COVID, and then it just seemed to get worse throughout the year. There's all this money printing and stuff. We felt really strongly that, and if you look historically, there's usually some kind of lag time between the halving and then the price really kicking up. So we thought the end of this year was going to be kind of the perfect storm of madness that was really going to kick off a new bull market. And we started preparing for this 6 months ago. So we started staffing up, we started scaling up a lot of the infrastructure, just to have way extra capacity, just in case we saw those kinds of new all-time highs in terms of the number of new users coming in, or the number of active, concurrent sessions and things like that. So we've been preparing. I hope the other guys have been preparing, because the last couple of days, it really looks like things are heating up. We're not back to the levels that we were in early 2018, but we've just hit yesterday an all-time high for the number of new accounts in one day, in the last 2 years. So it really seems, in the trend, the line is just going, like that. So things seem to be getting hot. So I hope everyone's ready. It was an issue for sure. We have 30 plus bank accounts all over the world. Mm-hmm. And it kind of varies bank by bank. We try to pair people up with the bank that's kind of best for their geo, where they're going to have, it's in the same time zone, or they're going to get the cheapest fees, or, it's going to be the fastest to settle. And so it kind of depends, these banks are of different quality everywhere. In some places they're top tier, the top bank in the country. In some places they're a startup bank, or maybe even just a payment processor that's working with a bank. And then you have kind of two layers of potential problems. So it varied all over the world, but I would say it was a significant issue, and, a very painful issue for people when they are, they're seeing the price go up 10% every day or something. And they're like, hey, I sent in $1,000 yesterday, and now the price, it's 3 days later and the price is up 30%. So I lost 30%. And they want to hold the exchange accountable for that, or, the bank accountable for that. It's a very bad, tough situation for everyone. And it kind of just highlights the benefits of crypto, right? That when you send your crypto to somebody, you can see exactly where it is at all times, and when it got there. And there's no question about is it lost in some intermediary bank where they mistyped, the wire transfer form or something like that. And those kinds of things take weeks to unwind. So that was definitely something we really focused on scaling out, was just the diversity of our banking relationships to have more options for fallback and load balancing. And instead of having your paycheck go to Bank of America and then you have to send it back out to the exchange. You could just have your paycheck deposited directly into your Kraken account, or you wire money directly into your Kraken account, and that is going to solve a ton of problems. I mean, there's still a lot of crypto companies that have problems getting bank accounts. There are still a lot of people that they get pushback from their banks, depending on who their local bank is. The bank might just shut down their account if they see that they're sending money to a crypto company. So I think it's going to solve a lot of problems for our clients. And I think it's going to reduce latency, reduce fees. It's going to be able to bank people that have so far had like a lot of trouble in getting banked. Yeah, I think it's going to mean like less friction all around. I mean, if anything, we've been in this process over the last several years of just increasing the amount of documentation and process for things that we have. And we've got licenses in other geos as well. We're licensed in the UK with the FCA. We're licensed in Japan. There are many other license applications underway. So it's something that we've kind of gotten used to, of just documenting everything, having explicit process in place for everything. And, that's what the regulators want to see in the States as well. So to some extent, we can probably copy paste like 80% of an application and everything they want to see. And then, there's something that's like unique to each geo that they want to see that we have to do. So I wouldn't say it's really changed a lot for us. It's increased a lot of documentation that we have to keep around and keep maintained. But our process, I think, it's almost always better. Actually, I can't even think of a single case where we have found out what a bank's process is, and it's been better than our process. I think because we've been a technology company first, and because we're dealing with crypto, and because we were just very security conscious from the beginning and aware of like what the implications of that are for us. And there's no FDIC of crypto. If your crypto exchange gets hacked, there's no insurance from the government or anything like that. So I think because we kind of did all this from the beginning with all this in mind, that just anytime a regulator sees what we're doing, they're just like, whoa, this is crazy. Or anytime we see what a bank is doing, if we're talking to a bank about what each of us is doing for security, it's just like our security is like 10 times what they're doing. Like we're doing things they're not even thinking about. So I think we could have gotten away with like a lot less, I guess. Like it doesn't take that much to be a bank compared to what it takes to be a crypto exchange. We have a bunch of great banking relationships now, but you're right that correspondent banks could be kind of a blocker for some people. If you're not one of the big mega banks, you usually rely on a correspondent bank to do like international wires, for example. So those relationships are going to be very important. It's a bit of like, I guess this is in several countries, a bit of an oligopoly. And you have to kind of work your way in. And I'm not sure of any case where, are they legally allowed to block out your bank? If you're like a legally operating bank, you've got the license, you've got the backing of the Federal Reserve. Can these big mega banks not be an intermediary for you? I don't know, but you're probably aware of Operation Choke Point, where basically these correspondent banks kind of have made it very difficult, basically made certain businesses illegal, de facto, like because they block them from accepting payments. So therefore they can't really do business unless they can just do 100% of their business in cash. So this is an issue, and there's just something that came out from the OCC, which kind of addresses this, which seems awesome. So hopefully this will not be a problem, but fingers crossed. So I think that the bank's ability to custody crypto, being a regulated crypto custodian with very clear laws laid out, about the bailment, about what happens in a bankruptcy situation, who the coins really belong to. Being a qualified custodian, I think, will be very attractive to a lot of institutions who right now don't have many options for where they can custody their Bitcoin legally. So I expect that business to grow. And I think just for the retail consumer, I think it's really interesting to be able to have your bank account and your crypto wallet all in one place. And, I think we're already seeing the early success of PayPal, and Cash App is doing very well too, that people kind of want to do everything in one place. And I think that, Kraken has that crypto ethos, and I think we understand the crypto investor, and, we're kind of coming from that angle first, where I think these other guys have kind of started with fiat currency, and then they're adding in crypto. But I think we can cater better to these people that are crypto first. And, not only will we be able to help them trade Bitcoin, but hopefully we can help them engage in other smart contracts and DeFi things that are coming, and be more of a gateway for all of that stuff. Pretty amazing. It definitely feels like we're charting new territory. It's like you're entering like a new era, and I think a lot of other states are going to copy what Wyoming has done. So I think it was really important to get it right there. And people keep saying stuff like, "Oh, the institutional money, is going to come into Bitcoin at any time." But I think one thing about the United States, we've got this system, the federal system of, every state has their own rules and stuff, and the federal government hasn't really, said too much about what states can do at the individual level, and it's really been a big hurdle for people, and especially for big businesses that want to get into crypto, because they potentially have a multi-state footprint. They've got to worry about what the issue is, how these things are going to be treated in multiple states. They may, if you're a big hedge fund or something, or some other kind of investment fund, you might need some kind of explicit federal regulation. So I think this is like a step toward that. I mean, basically, a lot of people, I think, are still on the sidelines because of uncertainty. And to the extent we can just give people more certainty around what's going to happen, I mean, even if it's not ideal, but just that they know, and it's not going to have to get determined, in a court for the first time, as part of their case, like they can have some predictive ability there. I think that's hugely valuable. And I think seeing more of that, just more certainty come to more states and federally, will be really awesome, and will enable more people to come into this space. Somewhat involved in the bit license. I mean, they asked for comment. We gave a bunch of comments. We told them that this is a disaster. A lot of the industry, I mean, they got thousands and thousands, more than 3,000 comments, I think, on the bit license. And it just seemed like they were just going to do whatever they wanted to do, and obviously Lasky had an agenda, and he left and started up a consulting firm to help people get the bit license. It's crony capitalism 101. And the bit license just got so much wrong. And when we spoke to the New York DFS after the bit license came out, they thought it was the bee's knees. They thought this is everything. This is so great. Actually, we don't have any intention of changing anything in this, and we're going to keep rolling. So we don't think it really protects consumers. We think a lot of retail customers in New York have really missed out on this massive wealth transfer with crypto, because they've been prohibited from engaging with some of these platforms where they can do this stuff because of the bit license. I mean, to a greater extent, this is also the issue broadly in the United States with the SEC and the CFTC, in that if you're a US resident, you cannot go trade on any offshore platform that you want. Those guys actually have to be regulated in the United States to serve you. So that means, you know, you're quote unquote protected from doing the things that you want to do. And, you know, in this industry, there's so much gray area that a lot of exchanges that are offshore have just shut off taking US customers entirely because it's just too dangerous, you know, to let you invest $5 into this one thing because you might create, you know, a massive international, you know, lawsuit and criminal charges and all of this stuff. Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to see more states adopt Wyoming's approach. And I mean, if they could just copy paste what Wyoming has done, that would be amazing. But I think it's a good template. You know, we're more focused, I'd say, like at the federal level on what the policy is going to be, you know, across the country, basically. The SEC and the CFTC are still kind of hanging out there. They both are sort of regulating the space together. You know, it's anytime there's a new coin that emerges, it's potentially a security or it's potentially a commodity. And, you know, you might be talking to either or both of those guys on any given day. So, you know, those are the enforcement agencies, and they're kind of just trying to interpret the law and go out and punish people, basically, who they think are doing wrong. And if you think the law is wrong, then you have to go to the legislature and you have to get the law changed. So that's where we're investing more of our effort, really. We think that there need to be some changes, some explicit carve-outs, some clarity. You know, a lot of the law that's being enforced today was written 50 plus years ago, you know, before computers existed, before the internet existed, you know, certainly before crypto existed. So the regulators are trying to kind of interpret, you know, what does this mean? You know, there are all of these old cases, and then, you know, you're trying to figure out, like, okay, how does this Orange Grove case relate to cryptocurrency? You know, just this like Ether 2 thing it's been a very interesting, you know, philosophical conversation at the company. But like, you know, this transfer process of like one coin converts into a different coin, you know, through this process and comes out at a later date. You know, is it the same coin or not? Or like, how is that regulated? Is it a commodity and then does it become a security and then it's a commodity again? These are like brand new problems that were never contemplated when the laws were written, when these old cases happened. And I think they need a fresh look. And I think the law needs to address this stuff explicitly. Yeah, I think there's a lot of demand out there to borrow. Obviously, you know, it wouldn't be like a normal fractional reserve bank would be, where they've just got infinite amounts of money to lend. It would be either we're lending from our own balance sheet, you know, the fees that we take in as profit, basically, we could lend those back out, or we could borrow coins from other people that we have in a lending pool and then lend those coins out, or, you know, do some sort of like lending matchmaking program or something like that. I think that's a hugely demanded product, and yeah, it would be great to do something there. Yeah, I played a lot of Magic, you know, for a few years, probably like what I did for 16 hours a day. I played a bunch of video games as well. You know, let's see, I played, you know, the whole, well, up into a point, you know, probably up through like Final Fantasy VI. I played all the Final Fantasy games. We had a Nintendo and a Super Nintendo, and we had a computer, and I was playing computer games, you know, since I was a kid as well. So I don't know, I played all kinds of stuff. I played other card games like that are kind of Magic-like. I played Pokemon, a little bit of Pokemon. There are a bunch of other, Magic-like games that I dabbled in. But Magic was really what I spent the vast majority of my time from probably the age of like 13 to 16. Like all I did was play Magic. There are all these complicated things to figure out. And it feels like there's always there's a way to win, really, if you can like figure out what the right path is. And because there's so much gray area now, and because people are looking at these things kind of for the first time in history, there are arguments to be made on either side. And I think this is, what's really, what kind of like attracted me to philosophy as a major in college was that, there's certain things that just are not knowable, and you could argue either side of it. And, both sides, potentially can have very good arguments, and there can be no real knowing of what the real answer is. And sometimes things start as philosophical problems, and then science figures them out, through observation. And then they're not philosophical problems anymore, and in some cases, like sometimes the law is already there and it's clear, and it just doesn't matter what you think about it because the law just says what it is, and that's the end. So I feel like it's created this sort of like fun maze where if you're like into these things, if you're into like reading a lot of technical documentation and then reading a lot of legal documentation and then figuring out like where you can kind of thread the needle. I don't know, personally, I find that like really fun. I think, what's still tough is making payments with crypto. And, there are a bunch of companies, obviously PayPal now, they've said that they're going to start letting people pay for things with crypto. The BitPay has been around for ages. But, as the blockchains have become more used, the fees have just gone up, right? And they've kind of lost their competitive edge versus credit cards. When back in 2011, you could legitimately tell people, you could send me $5 and it will be cheaper on Bitcoin than it would be with a credit card. But that's not the case today. So I would still love to see payments, and Lightning Network may be part of the solution to that. I think there's still side chains, other innovations coming that I think will make the payments component cheaper. Some people just say, well, that's just like, it's always going to be a layer 2 thing. Crypto is just going to be a store of value, and your payments should just happen like off chain. But I would really love to see on-chain payments become, and to some extent, you can use some of the less used chains to do this, like Litecoin or Bitcoin Cash. You can make cheaper payments on those. And I think that we'll probably continue to see a vast diversity of coins, and some chains will just be more useful for things than other chains. But I would love to just see crypto more widely accepted everywhere. So I think that's one challenge for us still. But I don't think that's like on the industry. The products are out there to do it. You can do it with BitPay today. You can do it with BTC Pay Server today. It's just a matter of, I think, more consumers getting the coins in their hands and demanding to pay. And we might actually see first people paying with like USDC or Tether or some like dollarized version of a crypto before we see like Bitcoin payment mass adoption. A lot more of what I've been doing. I think that, I think the future is going to be much more about kind of managing the regulatory situation. And I still think that that's a risk, that something bad could happen. I think people are really starting to see, especially after this year and everything that's happened, all the money printing, people are questioning, like, is this fiat system like legit? Like, how can they just print money? The guy just said like they have infinite amounts of money. So like, why am I paying taxes? Or, why aren't they sending me more stimulus, or more, support when they can just print infinite amounts of money, they told me I can't go to work, so who's going to pay my rent? But they're not doing it. You know, so I think people are questioning the system a lot more. I think that that's going to drive a lot more awareness and adoption to crypto. But you know, I'm still worried, like longer term, that I don't think we've hit like escape velocity yet, globally, you know, as a movement. And I think there's still things governments can do to shut it down if they really get scared, you know, if they really feel like their power is slipping away because they're losing control of fiat. If no one wants fiat anymore, you know, how can you make people want fiat again? Well, maybe you eliminate the alternative and you make it, you know, you force them to do it. So I'm kind of worried about that. So I'm probably more so than I have been like over the last 10 years, going to be engaged in discussions with regulators and lawmakers. You know, if you can get, you know, the states, there is some separation of powers between the states and the federal government, and the federal government can't always just do whatever it wants. So, you know, states could, it could play out in a couple different ways, I guess. But the more I think states address the issue proactively, I think the more likely it is that the residents of that state will have a stake in crypto, and a stake, you know, in what happens at the federal level as well. And I think we also want to just get crypto into the hands of everybody, so that there'll be, you know, I think one thing we can count on, I'm a bit pessimistic about this, but I think that politicians are just, you know, in the long run, just self-serving. And I think that to the extent we can just put crypto in the pocket of every politician, you know, they'll like work to benefit themselves. And, you know, I don't think that they're like actually, apart from some kind of dictatorships where there's kind of one guy saying what's going to happen, I don't think that, you know, all of the whole Senate of the United States is kind of like colluding together to like ban Bitcoin or anything. But I think that, yeah, to the extent we can like educate them about it, give them some Bitcoin to care about and to feel like they need to protect, that'll just work out better for everyone in the long run.